It is now my great pleasure to introduce Therese Rein as our guest speaker this evening. We are delighted that Therese has agreed to speak to us this evening, and it's for a number of reasons. Firstly, Therese is one of Australia's success stories. She is an extraordinarily successful entrepreneur who has grown her own business, Ingeus, into a major international employment services business. She is an inspirational businesswoman and a role model for many women and for men. In addition, Therese has not sought recognition for what she has done, and CEW believes she deserves it more than most. Tonight is about recognising and celebrating Therese's success. Therese started her career as a rehabilitation counsellor, helping people get back into the workforce, having been inspired by her father. She launched her own business, taking out a $10,000 loan against her family home. In 2007, Therese sold her Australian business in order to support her husband and to ensure there was no perceived conflicts when he took over as the Prime Minister of Australia. I am sure for Therese that must have felt like selling her family home. But Therese was undeterred. She took this as an opportunity to grow her business even further internationally and became the first Prime Minister's wife to remain in paid employment. Ingeus now operates from 150 locations around the world, employing 2,250 people, and is the largest provider of employment services in the United Kingdom. Last year, Therese restarted in Australia by acquiring Assure Programs, a business psychology services company. In between building Ingeus and supporting her husband, Therese has found time to raise 3 children, Jessica, Nicholas and Marcus, and is now the proud grandparent to Josephine. Therese has been extraordinarily generous to the community. She established the Rein Foundation to formalise her family philanthropy, but she closed it down when her husband became Prime Minister, again to avoid any perceptions of conflict. She hasn't stopped, though, giving to the community because she is now the director of a large number of not-for-profit organisations, including the Indigenous Literary Foundation, Oz Harvest, and the International Paralympic Committee, just to name a few. We are proud to have Therese as a member of CEW, and we are very grateful for her taking the time tonight to speak to us. And I'd like you all to help me in warmly welcoming Therese to the stage. Thank you.
Well, that all sounds a bit daunting. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. I'd like to start by acknowledging the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation who have been custodians of this land on which we dine and celebrate in this beautiful room, which reminds us of spring, but have been custodians here for 40,000 years. 40,000 years of continuing care and history, and I want to honour their elders, past and present, and any other Indigenous people here. Belinda, thank you so much for that introduction. I didn't actually expect that that's what was happening tonight, but I do appreciate that warm welcome. And Cato, another triumph. Well done. What a wonderful evening. And I think it would be nice if everyone just thanked Cato and the committee. As I was contemplating what I was going to talk to you about tonight, I thought actually what we're here about tonight is opportunity. And as I was thinking about opportunity, I was reflecting on the people to whom I'm grateful. I started thinking about, was there one person to whom I was grateful because what they had said or done towards me early on had made all the difference. And I'm afraid I have to tell you about a number of people. The first person I want to tell you about is my dad. My dad was born in Sydney. He grew up here and he loved planes. He went to an air show when he was about 8. and he spent his pocket money and he went for a ride in a biplane. And after that, he just loved planes, and he just wanted to fly planes. So during the Second World War, he joined the RAAF, and he went overseas as a navigator, and he flew in Canada, he flew in Britain, he flew in the Middle East, and he ended up flying in India. Dad was 6'4.5". He was a big, strapping young man. When I asked him, Daddy, how did you salute in the war? He said, like this, to the girls. Dad was a rower, and he played rugby. And as I said, he loved to fly. And he was flying with someone one day in India. He was flying a plane that had been damaged in the theatre of war. The plane took off and crashed. And as a result of that, he experienced a very severe spinal injury, which resulted in him becoming a paraplegic. Now, at that point in the 1940s, paraplegics were not expected to live very long. In fact, they were expected to live about 5 years. Typically, they succumbed to various kinds of infections and died. And so Dad found himself back here in the Concord Repat Hospital as a young man with a spinal injury, pretty much in a wheelchair, having to learn how to get out of bed, how to do all the necessary things of life, how to get dressed, how to get around. And he decided that what he wanted to do was he wanted to study to become an aeronautical engineer. So he wanted to go to university and he wanted to study. And people around him in the hospital, perhaps wanting to protect him from disappointment, said, look, John, you can't. Just in case you hadn't noticed, mate, you're handicapped, you're in a wheelchair, you're not going to be able to get to university. You're not going to be able to get up and down the steps of the lecture theatre. You're not going to be able to cope with all of that. You're going to be in too much pain. They won't even let you into the university. Luckily, for my dad, he was surrounded by people who loved him and believed in him. And this is what I want us to think about. He was surrounded by people who loved him and believed in him, as well as the people who were trying to protect him from disappointment. And luckily, for my dad, that was kind of red rag to a bull. And when I was talking with Belinda earlier tonight, and I asked her, can you think of someone in your life who said or did something that made all the difference? She said, yes, someone who said, I don't think you can, and it was red rag to a bull. And off she went. So for my dad, it was red rag to a bull, and he wrote to the university and he applied and he was let in. I don't think he told them he was in a wheelchair, a minor omission. He got the names of other people who were going to be studying aeronautical engineering with him who lived close by, and he offered to drive them to uni if they would carry him up and down the steps of the lecture theatre. And he went down to the engineering department in the hospital, and he worked with them to modify a car so that he could drive himself. When he graduated at Sydney Town Hall, not far from here, he received a standing ovation. People didn't think that people in wheelchairs could go to university or could get degrees. Dad then wanted to work. He wanted to work because work is very important to people. Work is about learning, being challenged, about being engaged in something that is fascinating to you. It is about being independent, about being in a community of people. So work at its best can be highly rewarding. For Dad, it was normal. It was the next natural step. There were lots of barriers and lots of knockbacks, lots of assumptions that because he was in a wheelchair that he wouldn't be able to cope. And eventually someone gave him an opportunity. They gave him a work trial for a week in Adelaide. So he and Mum got in the car and drove from here to Adelaide for a week's work trial. Nothing if not adventurous. At the end of the week, the senior aeronautical engineer at Weapons Research Establishment, a man who's an angel in our family, said to Dad, well, mate, you've got the job. All the other aeronautical engineers are also sitting down. So Dad had a life of playing with rockets and planes, and he loved it. He also had a life where he loved sport, and so he was involved in the beginning of wheelchair sport in South Australia. He was an archer. He carried the flag at the precursor to the Paralympic Games, the Stoke Mandeville Games. He won gold for Australia. I guess it's fair to say that for me, when I think about someone who did or said or was, in fact, something that made all the difference in my life, I'd have to say that my dad was one of those people. He was someone who said to me, "You're not allowed to say, Therese, I can't." And when someone who has gone through everything that he had been through says that, you think, actually, if you can get up out of bed early every morning, spend all that extra time getting ready, get yourself physically in the chair, out to the car, get the chair into the car and go to work, get the chair out of the car, go into work, be at work and then come home, then play sport, who am I to say, no, I can't? So he made an enormous difference in my life. I was never, I think, allowed to give up without giving of my best. I'm also immensely grateful to my mum. Mum was a physio. She worked part-time. She had 3 children. She ran the house. She looked after us when Dad went into hospital for periods of time. She was a professional. She taught me to dance in the sunshine. She taught me to read and love poetry. She taught me to laugh. And I think, and I know, I still ring my mum every night. She's 86, and I think I'm ringing her to support her, and I know actually what's actually happening there is she's supporting me. And she's another person who's always said, yes, I think you can. I think you should have a go at that. Pick yourself up and have another go. Those people in our lives make all the difference, don't they? So that when in 1989 I found myself in Brisbane, and I had just resigned from another company, and I went downstairs to talk to the physiotherapist from whom they were renting rooms, and I said, I've just resigned and I'm not sure what's going to happen. And she said to me, Therese, what are you going to do? You've just resigned from your job. You're working as a rehab counsellor. You're doing a great job. What are you going to do? And I said, well, I don't know, actually. I haven't thought about it. And she said, well, have you ever thought about setting up your own company? And I said, no. And she said, well, if you did, then I would be willing to invest. And I said, what, money? She said, yes, money. And I said, why? And she said, well, South East Queensland needs a high-quality, professional, private rehabilitation provider, and I think you can do that. Those magic words of, I think you can. So, oh, okay. Well, I'll have a think about that. And I went back upstairs and did a mind map, 1-page business plan, and what I now understand to be a profit and loss cash flow budget. I just made it up, really. And then went home and told Kevin, firstly, I'd resigned. Secondly, that Jane had said I should set up a company. And thirdly, she'd said she would invest. Fourthly, this is how much it would cost. And what did he think? And he said, I think you'd be good at that. I said, we'd have to borrow. We'd have to borrow money, and they'd probably want to secure that against the house. What do you reckon? And he said, we could do that. I said, if I lost the money, would you divorce me? And he said, no. Okay, that's good, that's good. And so we started. And I'm immensely grateful to Jane, who said, I think you can do that. And I'm immensely grateful to Kevin. And then I'm immensely grateful to all the people I work with. People actually like Greg Ashmead, who's sitting down here, who is our Global Managing Director. People who, around the world, in 10 countries, are committed to helping people flourish. People who believe that tomorrow can be better than today. People who go the extra mile and use their creative intelligence, their application and their skills, and people who are constantly encouraging to me, constantly encouraging to each other, and constantly encouraging to our clients. I'm also grateful, immensely grateful to our clients. And just to tell you a story about one of our clients, it's a man named Harry. He came down from the north of England. He came down to London expecting that he would find a job and that he would have somewhere to live. And in fact, he had some money, he had some savings, but they disappeared very quickly because the price of rent was much higher than he expected in London than it was at home. So he found himself homeless, and he found himself sleeping on the streets of London. And the summer came and went, and then the autumn, and then the winter came and went, and still he was on the streets. And then the spring, and another summer, and another year, and another year. So when he came in to see one of our wonderful advisors, Kate, in our office in London, he came in and he hadn't actually been able to sleep much for a long time. He hadn't been able to bathe. He didn't have clean clothes, and he wasn't all that fragrant. Kate, however, asked him his name, his first name, and he said, "My name's Harry." And she shook him by the hand and looked him in the eye and said, "Nice to meet you, Harry. Would you like a cup of coffee?" And Harry said, "I would, thank you. How did you have it, Harry?" So they came and they sat down together next to each other, and she said, "So, Harry, tell me your story." And he told the story. And she said, "So, we'll find you somewhere to live, and we'll see you in a week when you've been able to have a sleep and been able to have a bath and been able to wash your clothes, and we'll get you some new clothes." So we found him somewhere to live, and he came back a week later, and he had had a haircut, he had clean clothes on, and he was feeling much better because he had a good, solid week of sleep behind him. And she said, "So, Harry, tell me about you. Where have you worked before?" And he said, "Well, I've been a storeman and packer, and I drive a forklift." And she said, "Okay, and what do you love? What do you do where time just vanishes? What intrigues you?" And he said, "I love antiques." And she said, "Tell me about that." He said, "Particularly Greco-Roman." So she said, "That's wonderful to know." She said, "So you know how to move things and you really love antiques?" And he said, "I do." She said, "Well, great, well, I'm going to call someone." And she rang Sotheby's. And she said, "I'd like you to give this man a work trial. He hasn't worked in a while, but he loves antiques, particularly Greco-Roman. He knows how to operate a forklift, and he's a storeman." So he went for a work trial, and at the end of the week, Sotheby's said, "Harry, you've got the job." Kate was saying to him, "I think you can." Kate was saying to him, "I think tomorrow can be better than today." And he got to a point where he went, "Yes, I think I can too." I'm immensely grateful to our clients that they trust us, that they tell us their stories, and they allow us to accompany them on the journey, and that they trust us when we tell them, actually, tomorrow can be better than today. I'm also grateful to this country. I know this country isn't a person who said or did something that made all the difference, but this country is like a person. This country is filled with wonderful opportunity. This country is filled with wonderful people. We are a resourceful people. We are a pragmatic people. We love to problem solve. We're prepared to innovate. We have amazing resources. We have freedom. We have a legal system which works. And we have, all the lawyers will be happy in the room. We also have a sense of the possible. And I'm grateful to have started a business here. I'm grateful to have been able to start a purposeful business here, which was able to be both financially viable, was able to grow, and has been able to really help a lot of people change their lives. I'd like to invite all of you here tonight to reflect on the people in your lives who have said to you, I think you can. The ones who've said or done something, like offered you an opportunity, which has made all the difference. The ones who've encouraged you to stand that much taller. The ones who've encouraged you to lift your head and dream. The ones who've patted you on the back, who've mentored you, who've guided you. I'd like you to think about whether it's possible to thank them, and I'd like you to think about whether it's possible to pay that forward and return it in spades to lots of other people. Thank you.